I was standing in my own kitchen when a police officer calmly told me there was nothing he could do. The person refusing to leave wasn't a burglar, wasn't a guest, and wasn't a tenant on paper. Apparently, they were now protected by the law, and I was the one who had to leave. At that moment, I had no idea how bad the situation was about to become. What I thought would be an awkward conversation turned into months of legal stress, thousands of dollars, and a crash course in squatter and tenant laws I never wanted to learn. This story does end with me getting my house back, but not before I learned just how easy it is for the wrong person to exploit the system and how powerless homeowners can feel when it happens. I own a small single-family home that I worked years to afford. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine, and it represents stability I didn't always have growing up. About a year ago, a friend of a friend reached out asking if they could stay temporarily while they got back on their feet. They had just lost a job, were between apartments, and promised it would only be a few weeks. Against my better judgment, I agreed. No lease, no rent, no written agreement, just a verbal understanding and a set of house rules. At the time, it felt like the decent thing to do. They helped around the house, stayed mostly to themselves, and everything seemed fine at first. Weeks turned into a month, but they kept reassuring me they were actively looking for a place. Looking back, this is where I made my biggest mistake. I didn't want to seem heartless. I didn't want to push someone who was struggling. I also didn't think there was any real risk because, in my mind, this was my house and I could ask them to leave at any time. I was wrong about that in ways I didn't yet understand. The first red flag was small. They stopped mentioning apartment searches altogether. When I asked, they'd say things like, "The market is terrible right now," or "I'm waiting to hear back from a place." Then came the second red flag. They started receiving mail at my address. At first, it was junk mail, 10 official-looking envelopes. When I brought it up, they brushed it off, saying they needed an address for job applications. I didn't push back, but he made so heavy. Slowly, they stopped contributing around the house. Dishes piled up. Food went missing. They started treating shared spaces like they belonged exclusively to them. The tone changed, too. If I asked when they planned to move out, they'd get defensive, saying I was pressuring them or being unfair. I began to feel uncomfortable in my own home, like I had to tiptoe around conversations just to avoid conflict. The moment I really started to worry was when they said, casually, "You know, I've been here long enough that I have rights." At the time, I laughed it off, assuming they were joking. I had no idea that sentence would come back to haunt me. One night, I finally told them they needed to move out within 30 days. I tried to be calm, respectful, and firm. Their response was immediate and chilling. They looked at me and said, "I'm not leaving." They claimed they were now a legal resident. They said I couldn't just kick them out. When I told them that was ridiculous because there was no lease and no rent, they smiled and said, "That's not how it works." When I said several months, his demeanor changed. He explained that because the person had established residency, this was now a civil matter. He couldn't remove them without a court order. The squatters stood behind him, arms crossed, visibly smug. They knew exactly what they were doing. The officer even warned me that if I tried to change the locks or remove their belongings, I could be the one arrested. I remember standing there, stunned, realizing I was trapped in my own house with someone who knew the law better than I did and was willing to weaponize it against me. That night, I started researching squatter and tenant laws, and what I found made my stomach drop. In my state, occupancy alone could establish tenant rights. Rent wasn't required. A lease wasn't required. Time was enough. Eviction could take months. It would cost money. I couldn't shut off utilities. I couldn't intimidate them. I couldn't force them out. Every common sense solution I thought of was illegal. Meanwhile, they continued living normally, watching TV, eating my food, and acting as if the house belonged to them. Every day felt like an invasion. Sleep was hard. Stress was constant. I felt stupid, angry, and embarrassed that I had let this happen. I didn't feel safe in my own home, and that was something I couldn't ignore. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. The lawyer confirmed everything I feared, but also gave me a plan. I documented everything: photos, messages, mail, witness statements. We filed for formal eviction immediately. Once the paperwork started, the squatters' attitude changed. They bounced between threats and panic, claiming I was harassing them one moment and begging for more time the next. I stopped engaging completely and let all communication go through my attorney. For the first time in months, I felt like I had some control back. Court day arrived faster than I expected, but it was still nerve-wracking. The squatter tried to argue they were entitled to stay indefinitely and painted themselves as the victim. The judge wasn't impressed. After reviewing the evidence, the ruling was clear. They had no legal right to remain in my home. The eviction order was granted. Hearing that decision felt unreal. Relief didn't hit all at once. It came in waves over the following days, slowly replacing the constant tension I'd been living with. When they finally left, the house was a disaster. Trash everywhere. Damahay primera, adeniti, noticed before, and items I knew I'd never get back. It took weeks to clean, and even longer to feel comfortable in my own space again. But the silence was worth it. Being able to lock my door at night and know it actually meant something again was worth every ounce of effort it took to get there. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's that kindness without boundaries can cost you far more than you expect. Never let someone stay in your home without clear rules and written agreements, no matter how much you trust them. The law doesn't always side with common sense.